Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Now today's topic is not necessarily Prestidigitation, which of course is almost impossible to pronounce. It's the 6 best cantrips in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Why am I saying the 6 best cantrips? Because I tried to narrow it down to 5, and in the end I just decided that I could not leave off number 6. There was a fight between 3 of them, and I couldn't decide which one to leave off. And in the end I decided I'm not going to leave it off. I'm going to put it in the video. And now I'm just going to make it the best 6. Okay, so cantrips give you a minor spell effect. They can be utility, they can be damage. They're not as good as using your spell slots. So therefore, there's a lot of things you need to take into consideration because they're not quite as powerful, but you have an unlimited resource of them. You can use them as much as you like. So that means the key to cantrip selection is going to be, how often will I use it? Is there going to be regular use of this cantrip across all of the levels? And is there no substitute available? So I don't want there to be a substitute available in the form of a mundane item that I can purchase from a store or a basic core rule. And I also want the cantrip to be available to a wide range of classes. There's no point putting a best cantrip down if the only class that can use it is the warlock. So that's not really something I'm about. When we're talking about the best, we need to talk about the best across the board. So first off, the best cantrip is usually not a damage dealing spell. They're usually not the best ones. The only exception to this is if you are a warlock with Eldritch Blast, because the warlock is built around Eldritch Blast. That's the only exception to the rule as far as I'm concerned, because, and there are a number of reasons why I say this, and I know a few people will get really upset about the fact that I probably won't be talking about damage dealing cantrips in this video. If you are using a cantrip to do damage in combat, you're either playing at very low level, which doesn't usually continue for a really long time. It's a short phase in your character progression. Or things have gone horribly wrong and you ran out of spell slots and the only thing you have left is a cantrip. Now I know people are going to say, well yes, but cantrips scale up as you level up. They're simply never as good as the spell slots that you have available. That's my only rationale behind that. That's why you won't see damage dealing cantrips on this list. And in fact, if you watch a lot of other videos, you'll find pretty much the same sort of thing being talked about. So here is my list of best cantrips in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. I would like to make it clear, this is just my opinion, you do not need to agree with it. Starting with number 1. Minor illusion allows you to create an illusion of an object or create a sound. It is incredibly powerful in the right hands. I don't want to go through all the rigmarole about how the spell works because you can look at that in the player's handbook. That's not hard to do. It's available to 4 different classes, which is great because you want it to be available to as many classes as possible. But I've played whole games with minor illusion to great effect. So I personally think it's probably, yes, I would say possibly the best cantrip in the game of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. The only problem with minor illusion is it's very hard to use. It's actually difficult to use in the game because of the skill level and the level of creativity required to use it. So let me explain that a little bit more. You get an unlimited range of options with a spell like this. Yes, the effect is very minor. It's also heavily dependent on your Dungeon Master rulings. And it's also heavily dependent on you as a player being creative and clever. Now, if you want to see a really good guide on how to use minor illusion, I would go and check out Trent Monk's guide. He's got a really good guide. It's about 20 so minutes, but it explains everything in terms of outside of combat and inside of combat and how you can use this spell to great effect. and I really do recommend checking it out. This is a great spell for smart players, but really bad for primitive primates that understand only the big stick. If you are a person who views Dungeons and Dragons really only about combat, then you will struggle using the spell, and you should not take it if you don't know how to use it or understand how to use it. So that's the only thing I would say about Minor Illusion. Next on the list, hugely popular, number 2 for me, and that is Mage Hand. It creates a spectral hand that can manipulate anything weighing less than 10 pounds about 30 feet away. Probably one of the most popular cantrips I can think of in the entire game. This empowers you to pull a lever at a distance, open or close a door, lift a lid, pick up an object, move a winch for a portcullis, activate a tripwire or a trap. Really, there's so many different things you can do with this that keep your character out of harm's way, and which is why it's such a popular cantrip to have in the game. And also great for picking up things you don't want to touch, like dog poo, if you have a dog or an animal that does their business during the game. So number 3 would definitely have to be Prestidigitation. Oh, got it out. It produces a minor magical trick for about an hour. I don't want to list all the different things it can do. Yes, you can snuff out a light, you can light something that's quite small, you can change colours, you can change flavors, and there's just so many different things, but they're all very, very small effects. But that's beside the point, because it's still an incredibly powerful cantrip. There's so much you can do with the spell that it's hard not to just spam this thing all day long and just watch your dungeon master and players look kind of perplexed about why you even bother selecting any other spell in the game. It's also great for messing with everybody to the point of complete annoyance. And I have seen Prestidigitation used to pretty much do things that other players disliked and other dungeon masters disliked, so try not to be a complete dick with it. Okay, let's move on to number 4. Number 4 was really hard for me. I was beating myself over the head trying to figure out what it should be. And it was really hard for me to accept that this was number 4. Message. It creates a 120-foot link between two creatures that can whisper a short sentence. It's a two-way process, which is fantastic. Now, at first glance, you would think this isn't particularly useful. The only problem is that if you're only relying on the scout moving forward and then picking up whatever information you need and then coming back and then relaying that information in a whisper so they don't give away their position and reveal the party's location, that would normally be the process that we would follow in Dungeons and Dragons. But with Message, you don't need to do that. The other thing is really barriers aren't too much of an issue for this spell, which is great. Another great thing about it is if you split the party, either intentionally or accidentally, Message is really good for getting the party back together. There's actually so many different ways that Message should be used. In fact, I feel like I should have used Message in my own games far more than I have. It's really, you've got to toss it up between what availability you have in terms of your choices, right? We can't pick every single cantrip in the game. So possibly the easiest to use in all aspects of Dungeons and Dragons exploration, and it almost grants like short-term or a short form of telepathic communication. It's not exactly like that, but it certainly seems a lot like that when you're playing the game. So great for passing reliable messages without having to use carrier pigeons, paper darts, and the message in the bottle, which of course you never know if it's actually going to get there, right? Okay, number 5 has got to be Guidance for me. Guidance adds a 1d4 to any ability check or skill check, including initiative rolls. So it's possible if you wanted to, and your Dungeon Master wasn't upset by you doing this, you could spam this thing constantly so that you could get guess what? Guidance on your initiative roll when you're coming up to a combat. It's kind of a bizarre thing to try and do, considering the nature of the spell. It does have a gesture and a verbal component, and you would have to do it pretty much every single minute. But I guess still doable if you really wanted to. Now, why wasn't guidance in a better position? Why have I left it further down the list? Because really this list is based on what I consider to be the most important cantrips. Why is it number 5? The thing with guidance, unfortunately, is it really is a fantastic spell. If it wasn't for this one fact, I would say it should be much higher up the list. But the only hassle is it's only available to 2 or 3 classes, and one of those classes is the Artificer. And the Artificer is not necessarily going to be available in your campaign because it's really tailored for Eberron. And a lot of Dungeon Masters won't allow that class in their game. So therefore, you really could be looking at only 2 classes that can pick up guidance. It's also got a very short duration of 1 minute. So there are some things that you might want to try and do that take longer than a minute, and your Dungeon Master might say, no, you can't be spamming this particular cantrip or spell because you need to be focusing on the task at hand. And so it won't be possible to use guidance in this situation. These sorts of things don't come up very often, but it can in your game, which is probably the one of the drawbacks, but not the greatest drawback. It's the lack of availability in the different classes that put it at number 5. So this is a great spell for players who can't do anything without divine intervention or roll very low on a d20. Because getting an extra d4 might not sound like much, but we have bound accuracy in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and so just a +1 can make all the difference, and I've seen that happen more than a few times in the game. Okay, so number 6 has got to be Mending for me. Mending repairs a break or a tear no larger than 1 foot. Now, when you first read this, you think, well, gosh, that's nice. How often is that going to come up? It's actually an impressive spell, but it does have some drawbacks. So there are really very few spells that can do anything like this. A spell that can fix something is rare, and there aren't a lot of them. But here's the problem. It's a very situational spell. You have to have the right situation. You might have a Dungeon Master who allows you to use Mending to fuse 2 objects together, but there's no guarantee that you have a Dungeon Master who will use that interpretation of the rule or roll it in that way. So it is very situational. But the spell can even fix a magic item. Any kind of magic item is right as long as the break or tear is not too big. It won't re-imbue it with magic, but it can fix a magic item of all things. This is why Mending is on the list of best cantrips, but right at the very end, simply because of the situation. You really need to have the right situation for it to work. So a great spell for accident-prone klutzes who break everything they touch. Okay, so there are some honourable mentions in terms of cantrips that I want to talk about as well. So honourable mention goes to Shape Water, which is very impressive, and Mould Earth. These are great if your Dungeon Master will let you use Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And Shape Water and Mould Earth would certainly be somewhere in the middle of this list if your Dungeon Master is allowing you to use those cantrips. When I read them and saw how they could be used, I thought, holy moly, Shape Water in particular. It was very, very impressive. There's too many different things you can do with it. Outside of combat, inside of combat, it's great. So does this mean that you should only take these cantrips, these 6 cantrips, as your selections? If you've got 4 you can pick up, should you take the first 4? Should you take no damage dealing cantrips? Is that the question? Yes, it is. Well, I would say no. No, you should not necessarily take these 6 cantrips, because what you take as a cantrip is dependent on your class and your style of play. And a lot of these cantrips require, when I say style of play, they require a level of experience, they require a level of creativity and understanding, and also just being smart enough to understand how they work. A lot of these cantrips aren't very easy to use unless you know how to use them in the right situation. Otherwise, all they're going to do is sort of provide sort of interesting things to do to entertain yourself and get a good giggle or a laugh out of, and nothing else, rather than help progress the story. So you should still take damage dealing cantrips, but these are, in my view, the absolute best, just because you can use them so often and quite a lot. Okay, so if you found this video helpful and useful, fantastic. I actually have a series of videos on different spells that you're welcome to go and check out. I have hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters that could certainly help you play the game, and you're welcome to go and check those out as well. If you want to help support the channel so I keep doing videos like this, you can do that. It's easy enough to do. All you got to do is check out my Patreon page. I also have an affiliate link to the book depository and Amazon down in the description. I have a merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos if you want to buy some merchandise. Otherwise, just watch my videos. I get paid for the AdSense revenue that they provide, which is always good too. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.